Hi, my name is Estelle, and I'm a mother of 5.5 years old boy who is known to be autistic. So today we want to share our stories, how we found out about him being autistic. So one of the first signs I remember that I noticed was him. He wasn't responding really to his name. There was a pretty good eye contact, but it wasn't also very consistent. So, and since our son didn't have any fine motor delay, and he's actually been even advanced than his peers, so we never even thought about autism. And I just once mentioned to my husband about, do you think he could be autistic? He was 1 year old at that time. And I remember my husband said, no, him being autistic is very, very, very unlikely. So probably he's just delayed, and we just leave it like that. So, and from the age of 1 until 2, there was no improvement on anything. He bubbled, then he stopped. There was
speech related.
Yeah, speech related. Yeah. So he bubbled a little bit, like ba ba ba, ta ta ta, da da da, but then he just stopped. And then it started close to 1, his autistic behavior started to be more obvious, where he was spinning the wheels oftentimes, consistently, that's
He
a
was spinning
repetitive
circles.
Yeah, spinning circles. It could be anything, even a plastic bottle spinning all the time. And then not responding to the name. Then also not having a consistent good eye contact. So I don't know, I knew something was there, but I wasn't sure that it was autism. But I knew that somehow he was not neurotypical. He was different, because in some respect he was pretty advanced, as I said, his fine motor skill, but that was related to his analytical thinking. For example, he would go down from the bed, not with a facing down, right? Most of the toddlers, they would do this way,
Head first.
Yeah, head first. Yeah, he did it
with his feet first.
Yeah, with the feet first. So I don't know, or he would I remember would create kind of steppers from toys just to see what's in the counter. He was very, very curious. So in that point I was like, no, there is no way he's autistic, kind of, but then again and again, that's I think once I mentioned, always trust your gut instinct, and mothers know the best, because somehow we just know that something is not quite typical there.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest red flags were that he wasn't responding to his name. And I remember when we brought him to the pediatrician, and I asked the pediatrician if my son even recognized us, and the pediatrician said, of course he does, but our son Mark never really showed much. He never really recognized us or was super attached to us. I mean, there were times when he would be attention seeking and he would want to hug us and kiss us and things like that. But it was much different than our daughter, who's typical, who is almost like a shadow to my wife, where she's completely attached to her and she always wants to be with her. With our son Mark, he could sit in front of the television and watch Moana or other YouTube programs for 4 or 5 hours at a time, and it wouldn't faze him at all. He would that's actually his preferred activity. Whereas for our typical daughter, she just wants to spend as much time as possible with my wife and with her mother. So I think definitely, even though our son didn't show any fine motor delays, his not responding to his name was definitely big. Also, when he was around 1.5, his verbal communication abilities was not up to par with his peers, so that was also a red flag. his lack of parallel play or pretend play was also a little bit of a red flag, and his like spinning in circles or spinning wheels on a car, things like that were also a red flag.
Yeah, so I would say like he was like a little more attached to me because I think that was more related to because I was breastfeeding him like until like he was 2.5 years old, right? So he would for sure like make sure that I'm there. That's like as a he like uses that. I think like most of the kid uses that like as a comfort, right? But yeah, my husband, he's right, and I saw him like being okay like 1 hour or 2 hours by himself watching TV, and that was like kind of like a little like odd a little bit like because he's a kid who needs to like interact with us. So this is, yeah, I remember like asking myself, does he even understand me? That was the part, you know. It's not like him actually verbally can saying a word. That's not the thing. Does he understand me? Is there like any connection? So now I understand that it relates to social communication or nonverbal communication. That actually comes first. You always want to seek nonverbal communication. Why most of the specialists, they say like lack of the pointer, right?
Oh, that
Pointer
was
is
another thing.
very,
Yeah,
very,
he
very
didn't point.
important because when I point somewhere, oh look, David, there is like a playing, right? That's the joint attention. I look at him, do you see what I see? And etc. Right? So nonverbal communication comes first to the typical kids. And for my daughter, that wasn't a problem. She would show, she would share her emotions. This is the thing that you always need to look at. And it wasn't like then I realized it wasn't necessarily that he couldn't point. For example, when he was 1 year old, he was able to point to the letters, right, and say that because that was his preferred activities. But it was more related to hyperlexia. I don't want to like overwhelm you with tons of information right now. We're gonna talk
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. And as far as what we did, we set up an appointment with, because we live in South Florida, so we set up an appointment through Early Steps, where in Florida, if you're before 3, then they'll make a referral for you to get evaluated, and there's actually no cost. And I've heard in different parts of the country that oftentimes it takes like 6 to 12 months in order to get a diagnosis, but we were actually very fortunate where we were able to get an appointment for them for an evaluation within a few weeks. And we went to 2 sessions. Each one was about 3 hours. I think we saw like Dr. Parlade and Dr. Grace Victoria. She was
speech pathologist.
Yeah, she was the speech pathologist, and I was very impressed with them. They walked him through like numerous exercises, and then he got the diagnosis within just simply a few days after that. Now, when he first received the diagnosis, I was extremely depressed, and when I found out, I mean, we knew that he was going to get a diagnosis. I mean, it wasn't surprising, but around September 1st of 2019 is when my wife told me to watch a few YouTube videos and that our son might be on the autism spectrum disorder, that he might have ASD. So because I watched those few videos, then I was able to sync it up with the behaviors that he's exhibiting. We pretty much knew that he was going to get diagnosed. And I was extremely depressed for like 2 or 3 months because I thought that, why is this child who's done nothing wrong? Why does he have autism? Life isn't fair, all that stuff. I started internalizing like all that negativity and all that depression. And it was a very, very difficult time. But if you're going through something similar, I can tell you that it's extremely important not to be scared of receiving a diagnosis, because once you receive a diagnosis, it opens you up to receiving so many different treatment modalities that would not be available to you if you did not receive the diagnosis. So don't necessarily be scared that if your child, your son or your daughter receives an ASD diagnosis or an autism diagnosis that they're going to be stigmatized or labeled, because your insurance is going to allow you to receive ABA and to receive other therapies The child will also be able to receive more time at school and different, just different accommodations. IEPs,
individual educational program.
Right, different accommodations based upon the diagnosis. So if you, and now I understand that it's better that many people, and I have some friends like this, who don't want to get a diagnosis. They just think that with time, things will take care of itself. But in my opinion, and you're obviously welcome to do what you want, but I definitely think that it's highly beneficial to receive a diagnosis. And it was a very difficult time, but over time, you're going to get better, and if you're feeling sad, you're going to accept it, and your child's going to make progress, and things are going to work out. And I think that if you just kick the can down the road and you delay getting a diagnosis, then I don't think it benefits you, and I also don't believe that it's potentially in the best interest of your child as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree with David. I think like getting a diagnosis actually like just, it wasn't a surprise, but we just know the name. What is that, right? So it was, now, to be honest, it's not fair to say autism right now, right? Oh, he has autism, oh, it's autism, right? Because there is no such a thing, autism. There is autism spectrum disorders. So it's like, and all the kids, they are so different from each other. So we're just sharing our stories, but many other kids, they might have fine motor delays, gross motor delays, like they might have a dyslexia. So our son has hyperlexia, but other kids, they might have a dyslexia, which is like a learning disability. There are so many other like comorbid diagnoses which come with autism, like ADHD and all that stuff. But we're gonna talk about it, I think, later, because that's a like bigger topic, I guess. So, and it's better to it's better to just talk about it later.
And one really important point and one really important facet is that autism by itself is a social and communication disorder, but it's not a guarantee that your child is going to have an accompanying intellectual disability as well. And I think that that's a huge misconception, where many people think that children with ASD have some type of intellectual disability, or they're not as capable from an intellectual standpoint. But in my opinion, that's 100% false. My child is not even 6 years old, and he can do things intellectually that I cannot do. He can recite the alphabet backwards, and he didn't memorize it. He can actually visualize the letters. So there are things that he can do with his memory, with his working memory, that many kids, many adults who are brilliant cannot even do themselves. So remember that intellectual disability and autism are separate. Now, there are many cases of kids with autism who do have an intellectual disability, but it's not a guarantee. And I'm sure that there are many things that children with autism can do where they're actually blessed and they actually have more abilities than typical children. So don't necessarily get depressed and think that just because your child may have autism that there's definitely an intellectual disability associated with that, because that's not accurate.
Yeah, that's so true. That's not the end of the world, and you're gonna learn how to live with that, how to like interact with your kid, how to socially engage, and teach him that like being social is okay, and he will get that. Your kid will get there too, like, with your help, with your support. And and I just want to like also like repeat the signs of autism that we saw in our son. So it was lack of the pointer, not responding to his name, and spinning. So that's like restrictive repetitive behaviors, and
lack of parallel play,
and
the verbal communication delay.
So it's a speech delay, right? So this is the signs that we saw, and I started like pushing a diagnosis. I was just thinking that there is something not quite typical.
Okay, so thank you so much for watching this. We appreciate your attention. Please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below, and we'll respond to your comment as well. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.